Ah,
All right, we're online. Well, welcome to episode 2 of Content Creators Corner. I'm your moderator, Marx Pyle, IAWTV member and author of Television on the Wild Wild Web, How to Blaze Your Own Trail. Also a web series creator, done a bunch of them, about 5 or so different web series I've worked on. And today's topic is writing for web series. I love everything about writing, so it's awesome. We have 2 amazing guests, very talented, award-winning, writers of really excellent web series. We have with us Tina Cisa Ward, who is, I will actually put you up there, Tina Cisa Ward, who is IAWTV award winner and also Writers Guild of America award winner with Anyone But Me and a number of other web series, including more recently Producing Juliet. We have Dan Williams, who wrote and created the web series Asylum, very creepy horror web series, and which I believe got picked up on Hulu and, if I remember correctly, BET, right?
That's right.
Right. So you two also, I forgot to mention, have taught web series. Dan, you do a Creator Up series called Writing for Web Series. And Tina, you've been doing some teaching for web series, new media. I got the pleasure of making an appearance with your students. So,
yes.
So we'll get started with, actually, hopefully I covered most stuff, but I'm sure I missed plenty. So if you guys would just like to talk a little bit more about yourselves, also about how you got involved in web series in the first place, and maybe we can start off with Tina.
Well, geez, how do I get involved? Well, I got involved with web series in the first place because I was doing short films and then had done a feature, and then was putting together a project for another feature, and it didn't come together. And at that time, it was like late 2007, and someone had mentioned just the idea of doing a web series, which at the time, there wasn't a huge amount of stuff yet going on, that's for sure. And so I just kind of thought about it and thought about film all that time. And yeah, and I just kind of thought about the genesis of the idea came to me for Anyone But Me, and it was really kind of more out of the the tragedy of 9/11 and that kind of the thought of all these kids that are growing up in New York at that time now that never knew what New York was like pre 9/11, didn't know what it was like to just go on the subway and not worry about packages and all the military presence and all that other stuff. So that kind of idea struck me, and I really wanted to kind of just make a series with that as a backdrop. So, so yeah, that's kind of how I got into it.
Great. And Dan?
Yeah, I kind of a similar story. I had been writing on my own for quite some time, and I had this pilot script. That's how Asylum originated. It was a TV pilot that I'd been sitting on for a little bit of time. And a friend of mine, Scott Brown, had just had a lot of success with a web series called Blue Movies that he wrote and directed. He had a lot of fun doing it, really enjoyed being in the web series community, made a lot of contacts there. And he just pitched to me, hey, why don't we make your TV pilot as a web series? And so I thought about, okay, what would that look like to break it down into kind of smaller episodes, and did a rewrite on that and put a crew together. Scott ended up directing it, and that was kind of my foray into web series. And it's been, what I love about it is that you just sort of learn as you go along. So I've been trying to do things like this, right? Try to give back any morsel of information that I've learned along the way, because there's so many things before I started doing Asylum that I would have loved to have known. Like once you get in it, you don't really know what you don't know until you're, kind of in the middle of production. So that's what I love about web series, especially, is there's the opportunity to get into production, make some mistakes, have some fun, try different things.
Yeah, for sure. I think, all of us started a web series fairly early in the game. We just remembered, Dan and I, that I actually interviewed Dan for Sci-Fi Pulse back in 2010. So,
dating ourselves here, Mark. Be careful.
I was fresh out of high school back then.
Right, that's true.
So, and nobody knew I mean, the web series is so new. It's still new, but just brand new back then. So you guys have written, various projects and such. I wonder, what is your favorite genres to write? If it's the ones you've already created, or if there are any other genres you enjoy writing, and why?
Well, I'll take it first because it's quick and easy for me. Because it's, drama is really what I always like to do, and I love character dramas. So I have written other things. I always think of all my stuff as a character drama, even if I'm working on something that might be set a little bit more sci-fi. To me, they're all still character dramas. And so, yeah, that's my short answer. It's pretty much where I live. So it's, eventually maybe I have written a comedy pilot, but I'm still kind of pretty much drama. So characters, that's me.
Yeah, I think your brain has to be wired a special way to be a comedy writer. I don't think I have that either. I'm definitely into dramas. Tends to be sometimes sci-fi, although what I really like to do is just world build. So sometimes I'll just pick a point in history or a specific niche of some kind and just do a bunch of research on it. I really like immersing myself and finding out as much as I can. Meeting new people, it's kind of a good excuse to just ask stupid questions to people, So it really runs the gambit of stuff, but definitely all drama.
Okay. And then, so those particular genres, what's some challenges that you faced with those particular genres that are unique to them, or ways that perhaps you tried to push them?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're going to go into something like sci-fi, I think the producibility of it all really comes into factor. Obviously, you want to create, usually it's someplace in the future or some otherworldly kind of scenario. You want it to be believable, but you want to be able to do it on a budget usually, so you don't want it to be fake. So I think, sort of figuring out what the parameters are of your production is really the most difficult part, and then using that as a jumping off point for creativity. Like, I don't have a big budget, or I don't have these resources, but what can I do to still tell a story in that world? And I think that's when some of the most exciting things happen, is when you sort of have those confines. You have to think a little bit creatively, like, okay, what if I only could shoot this with one camera from one point of view? How could I get into the world that way without doing the bigger, scope type of shots of like $100 million movie or something like that?
Don't have that much money? What?
I know, I'm getting there, bit by bit.
How about you, Tina? Is there any ways that you've tried to kind of push that genre a little bit in ways that you haven't seen before?
Well, it's certainly like when we started, and certainly a couple of years after we started, doing kind of just a straight character drama was always very hard to get. It's hard to. There was always a lot of talk that nobody wanted to watch drama online. No one wanted to sit in front of their computer and cry and all of that stuff. It was all so like comedy driven, even more so than I think sci-fi does really well online too. But I felt like we were just getting pounded with it. Just that comedy is what's you should be doing online. So early on definitely was a challenge, and it also. And I think the web definitely, it's parallel a little bit with what's on television, and certainly now with television, as television has gotten a lot more serialized again with their dramas, which is fantastic. I think it's really helped now, even for a web series, to then, be able to do that and be more acceptable, and people will look at it and all that. But certainly when you're just doing straight kind of forward character dramas, I mean, you don't even see them on television anymore. I mean, Parenthood was probably the last one. It's always really hard to find that, you have to find that hook or something to kind of bring them into wanting to watch, a straightforward character drama without any big hook to it. So I think in that, it's not as much in the writing as it is, I suppose, in the marketing of it. And is to figure out how, well, I want to tell this story, so how can I make it marketable? Obviously, it goes back to, knowing your audience, which is that number one thing you should know as a writer. But Yeah, I feel like it's kind of a challenge in that where you're like, oh, I want to tell this story about this person who's gone through this. How can I make it marketable? That's kind of the biggest challenge I think that there is to it.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's talk about some of the most common questions people have. At least the ones I hear a lot. One of them is I always hear every year is how long or short should my episodes or seasons be?
Mm-hmm.
Some people are like really adamant. It's got to be like like 2 seconds, 3 minutes or something.
Yeah.
Right.
You'll lose people's attention, or it needs to be, or some people think, well, it needs to be longer, closer to normal television. Where do you guys stand on that?
To me, I think the longer it is, I think the more production value people expect. So I would kind of gauge it from that regard. Like if you're going to put up a web series episode that's 22 minutes, what would be the equivalent of a half-hour TV show, I think people expect TV quality production. So that's not to say that every web series has to be that. There are great web series that are shot just from a webcam POV. But I think if you're going to do that and you're going to ask the audience to kind of go along with you on this ride from a little bit cheaper production or kind of one camera angle or something, it's got to be a little bit shorter, I think, to get them to kind of engage with that and sit there and watch that episode for that long. There are great vlog style narrative dramas that I think are awesome, but I wouldn't do those personally for more than a few minutes. Otherwise you're wanting to cut away, you're wanting to go somewhere. And in terms of seasons, I don't know. I think it's about how long it takes you to, talking about character, how long it takes you to tell the arc of at least one main character, And I think it helps if you can split that up a little bit in terms of marketing. Like if you're able to shoot a batch of episodes, maybe hold some of them to kind of get some buzz, split it into 2 seasons if you want to call it that. But I've seen some people have some success with that, where they have some episodes in the can that they may not have told anybody about, so they can release them later, once they kind of build an audience a little bit. It's a nice little trick.
Yeah, cool. I think that it's always, when people ask about episode length, I don't think anybody's really figured it out yet, so I think that it always is, what do you think your show? It's like, I think all shows are different, and you can't really say that this show should be 2 minutes and that show should be 8 minutes. But I think Dan does make a good point about production value at a longer length. So, I mean, I'm always kind of the mind where it's like you need to kind of understand your show, and even to go and look at other shows, how long are their episodes? When we first started with Anyone But Me, it was like 8 minutes was what we were told from the guys from Quarter Life, because they made a drama, and so we were like, what do you guys do? And they're like, 8 minutes. And so, but it definitely grew throughout, and we always used to get the kind of complaint from audience that they want them to be longer. And even with Producing Juliet, I got the same thing, and even with Good People in Love. So it's like, I think it just all depends. I mean, what it comes down to for all of us, right, is budget. I mean, we would all love to make full-length, long-form shows, but it all comes down to how much we can really pay for it, because I do believe that it is good to have seasons, and if you can make it, relatively long season, I guess, which would be like 10 episodes maybe, that could be great. But if you can't really, afford to make those long seasons, I still think if you can make like 7 episodes and that's your season 1, and you can go into a season 2, definitely do that, because I think having multiple seasons really improves your chances of getting seen and success. So obviously YouTube lives on how many videos that you throw up there all the time, but definitely I think it does, you do want to have definitely broken up seasons, and if you can have multiple seasons, then I really do think you have a good chance of getting seen more.
Absolutely, and you made a good point, team, about audience expectation. Like, I feel like that matters, especially if you know where your series is going to be distributed. Mm-hmm. If it's going to be on YouTube where people are used to watching shorter content, maybe yours should be on the shorter side.
Right.
When we ended up putting Asylum on Hulu, there was a lot of audience confusion we noticed, because people normally go there to watch TV shows, so they're a little confused that our episodes were only 7 or 8 minutes long, so there's a little bit of re-education there. And And had we initially planned on launching on Hulu, I probably would have just made maybe 2 half-hour episodes or something, because that's what people are used to watching on a network like that.
Yeah, definitely yeah, for sure. I mean, and Hulu definitely, early on, we jumped on there pretty early in 2010, so they weren't as long form as they are now. Certainly now you have to be long form to be on Hulu. But anyone but me is still on there in short form. We never put any episodes together because we were on there for so long. We didn't have to do that, but I've certainly seen shows from the web that have gone on there that have put their episodes together to make them somewhat of a long form. And that's a whole other, long form for short form and all that. That's a whole other good writing discussion too, because that's really come to be so. Like, who knew that would be? It's funny that we've all kind of, we did all these short bits, and everybody wanted, and scripted anyway, wanted all these short bits, and now suddenly, like, all the online platforms want to go back to being long form. So it's like it's YouTube, that's short form, and maybe you can go to Vessel, and then Dailymotion, and Vimeo, but it's like all the bigger guys, they all just want long form, so you now have to think in long form and in short form. If you can write your show to be broken up, but it can come together seamlessly into a full-length, long form episode, I think that's where we have to be in terms of writers. We have to now kind of write for all these distribution platforms, not just write for one length anymore. It's just the game now. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask that because. If you're trying to pace your episodes in a season to match perhaps a 1 hour, episode of a TV show or a movie, what would you think might work better, like an episode of a TV show or a movie for distribution later?
It's a great question. I mean, I guess it again comes down to sort of budget of it all. What's nice about being able to sort of repackage it as a TV episode is that kind of breaks up normally into smaller bits anyway. An hour-long TV show is going to have 6 acts in it. So if you wanted to split that up act to act and make each of those a web episode, that works pretty naturally to me. And usually those are going to have a kind of, cliffhanger at the end, going to the commercial break anyway, back when we had commercials and all that stuff. But I don't know, that feels like a more natural fit to me. Breaking up a movie, I don't know, just as a writer, I couldn't imagine writing a feature and then trying to break it up into segments that kind of would make sense. It seems like a really tough way to reverse engineer it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's, film writing is a whole other game. You touched on it, Dan. It's like TV writing is like running up the mountain, then come back, and running up the, it's like every break you're running up the mountain to get to this, cliffhanger. So it is natural to just break it up that way. In film, you're just moving towards your big finish. So I don't know. I've certainly seen shows do that have just kind of pulled them together and made release things as films. And I know that we were asked early on too to do that, and for anyone but me. And I was like, well, they're totally written to be episodic, and these episodes. There's no way it's going to come together and make any sense in a film. So I totally agree that naturally does work more as a TV show than it does as a film. But even had the Bannon way back then, that did that ended up releasing as a movie as well. But I feel like they had a heads up on that was a possibility.
That was a possibility. I think you're right.
Yeah. So I think they certainly wrote it with that in mind. So if you're going into it and writing that, with that in mind, I'm sure it's. It's still not as natural as going to a TV show, but at least if you're writing with that thought, then it could work better.
Yeah, makes sense. And I forgot, Asylum, was that, did it break down?
We did.
Yeah,
it could have been recut as an hour because we did 6 episodes that were about 8 minutes each. So it could have come together. The way we did it was they were in 3 pairs, basically. So there was 1 and 2 were part 1 and part 2 of an episode. 3 and 4 were part 1 and 2. So we could have, even if we wanted to, we had this idea that we could kind of repackage the episodes depending on what distribution we got, So we could have had 3 episodes that were 15 minutes long, or 6, or 1 long episode. So we tried to be as flexible as we could when we went into the production as well.
That's good.
And that's the way you got to do it for sure. That's the way you got to go at it.
All right, well, so both of you have taught courses on web series.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of curious how you decided to put those curriculums together. Like, can you give us a basic idea of how you teach it?
Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I do a Creator Up course on writing the sci-fi web series. So it's very genre-based. And with sci-fi, like I mentioned earlier, you really want to, it's all about world building. So for me, I don't know, the majority of the course is developing the world. What are the rules of the road? What's the backstory of what's happening here? How is this world different than our own? But what are sort of the linchpins that we can help recognize how things work that are similar to our own lives? Like, how do we identify with whatever new planet or future scape you have put us on? And then it's really figuring out what characters we're going to put there, you know, before you even get to what kind of plot you want to put it. It's really about building the characters and how are we going to identify with them. And even if they're faced with obstacles that are going to be way different than our own, they're going to have some internal obstacles that we're going to identify with. So it's really about finding those before it's about destroying the Death Star or whatever the actual, you know, obstacle in their way is. It's finding that inner obstacle of, like, you know, who am I? Who are my parents? Those things that, like, people grapple with all the time, and trying to be able to tell those stories in a new kind of world that you've constructed.
Great. I hope everyone doesn't grapple with who their parents are.
I mean, you know, some people do. Is he Darth Vader? We don't know. Who knows?
I teach at the New York Film Academy here in Los Angeles, and mainly, you know, it's crazy, and it's really awesome that there's a lot more institutions that want to, you know, teach alternative media, and I've kind of come into it probably where everybody else is, where you get to the school and they're like, we don't know anything about it. What do you know? And you have a little bit more of a way to shape, you know, what you're going to talk about in your syllabus throughout the semester and all of that. I think for me, I always just want to stress to the students because that there are multiple platforms. You know, it's amazing. Everybody just thinks there's YouTube and nothing else. And so when they come in, I just really try to hit it home to them, and all these other platforms that are out there, and also that you know, in the web world, everything changes so fast, and there's always something new, and there's, you know, from Facebook doing something to YouTube doing something new to Vimeo now doing that. You know, it's just like it's always changing, and that you have to stay on top of it. And to, on the writing side, you just to know your audience. Don't ever, like, just, you know, just think, hey, there's this cool story, I think it'd be cool, I'm just going to make it and throw it up and think that everybody's going to have, you know, I'm going to get like millions of views on it. It's just, I try to kind of stress too that the marketing side of it is just as vital as when you're a writer and a producer. I mean, you have to kind of think of those things when you're doing that, because it's like when you're writing something, it's like, wow, well, where would my audience be? And if you don't have a definite answer to that, then you're really going to struggle online. It doesn't mean that you can't find your place, but it's, you know, it's so niche based, so it's you know, you need to know that going in, who your audience is, and where I can find all those people. You know, so mainly I just kind of try to stress, you know, doing your homework and learning all these other platforms and learning about these other shows and all this stuff. I've often given them, like, for an assignment, I've given them each like a show and said, go watch it, and then tell me if you found it okay, because I won't tell them where to find it. You know, I'll just give them the name of the web series and I say, you go find it. And it's how easy they find it and how hard they find it certainly tells a lot about the show. And the marketing of it. So I try to put it all in a practical sense so that they, one, get to know that there's all these other different kinds of shows out there, and that it isn't all just what they see on YouTube, that there's other scripted content. It's not necessarily scripted content that lives other places. You know, and just really kind of open their eyes to this whole world of what lives online and what you can do and what your opportunities are and all that good stuff. And you know, inevitably they're all like, well, how can I make money? And, and it's like, it's always their question, and they're always like, well, I don't know why I'm doing this if I can't make money. And you know, and it's but then they'll go and make short films too, and I'm like, well, you make short films, you're not going to make any money off of that. So it's fun though. I really enjoy it because I love the space so much that I really want to see it just continue to grow. And if and I like going and teaching because I feel like, well, you know, like Dan, I can impart some knowledge onto people and hopefully help them to help the medium grow into something even bigger. And you know, and that would be just, you know, the great thing about it. So it's fun. I enjoy it, and it's enjoyable, and it's also a little scary to find out how little they know about the web world. So, but they're learning.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, to watch as much as you can before you start doing, you know, just to see what's being done. And it's a great, you know, source of inspiration too, whether it's your genre or not. It's,
right.
You can borrow things from everywhere, you know, whether it's marketing or production or storytelling or whatever. So that's great advice.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and yeah, for them to watch something on another platform besides YouTube is a big win.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot out there.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about your guys' writing methods. You know, some people like to write series Bibles. You know, they like to really plan everything out in advance. Some people like to kind of explore their script as they go almost. You know, what's your guys' approach? You know, how did you approach one of your scripts, for example?
I'm really big into research. Like I said, I love world building, so I like to do as much research as I can before I start writing anything. Before I start planning characters or story or anything, like with Asylum, I did a bunch of research on mental health, hospitals, things like that, until sort of I got to the point where I was literally just going to burst with stuff I wanted to get on paper, you know? And then I'd almost do kind of like a free write, where I just put as much stuff as I can down, and just do kind of a rough and ugly outline of what I think a story and characters might look like. And then from there, I'll really dig into, okay, what's the story, what's my pilot story, what's the main characters and stuff like that. But to me, initially, it's just gathering information and digging into the world that I want to set the show in.
For me, it does kind of vary if it's a show that I'm just writing myself, or it's a show that I'm writing for a potential like studio. Then they want to see all this stuff, you know. I do think all those things are, even though I always find like outlines and character, all that stuff to just be like homework, because you're just like, but I just want to get to writing it. All that stuff is so helpful though. After you do it, you're like, wow, I didn't, you know, you're doing character like relationship maps and stuff, and you're like, oh, I've just learned a whole bunch about my characters by doing this tedious little thing. So I think now I'll start to probably, you know, all the stuff that I had to do for somebody else, I'll probably start pulling over to start doing even for my own independent stuff, because I do find it helpful, even though it's kind of tedium, but it's good. I mean, definitely I would never, you know, on the independent or the not independent side, I would never enter into a season without understanding what the arc is and the character arcs and story arcs and you know, plot A and B, and you know, so I definitely would have all that kind of built out, and then oftentimes I'd just go write, start writing episodes, and oftentimes things just, you know, as they do, they go and you find something else in it that you know didn't before, which I think is the thing with outlines. Like, you'll put together these outlines and you're like, all right, this is kind of my base, you know, but sometimes you find stuff when you're actually writing the episodes that is a better idea, because now you're in the world and writing. It's no longer just homework that you're doing. So it's structured for sure. Yeah, I think it certainly has to be. in that regard. So.
What I found is nice too is even after you're sort of into script, going back and I'll write or I'll put together like a little pitch for it, even if I'm not going to pitch the show to anyone necessarily at this point, because that just helps me sort of focus on what it is. Sometimes when I get into the show, just personally writing, like I sort of you can lose track of what you're trying to do, and writing out a pitch really helps you hone in on like, okay, what is this? What's the story? What's the tone? What am I trying to get to?
Yeah.
And then sometimes when you get back into it, you're like, oh, right, that's what I was going for. That's the feeling I was trying to evoke with this, you know.
Yeah,
totally.
totally.
Lost in your own head.
Yeah, totally. All those little exercises actually do help you. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because you're totally right, and especially if you're doing multi drafts of it, you have to kind of stop yourself and say, wait, it's like, oh no, well, why did I love this story in the first place? And get back to that, and and just kind of go from there. But yeah, definitely those little exercises are good.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, most people have heard about doing your log line, mostly as a pitching tool. But like you said, it's also a very good tool to keep you on track of what it's all about and what excited you about in the first place. So.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
And also like. Tina, you're writing, especially like I really like the dialogue of the characters. It's probably partly from maybe your stage background, stage writing background. You do have a stage writing background, right?
I actually don't. I wrote maybe I've written maybe 2 one-act plays, but I really have I don't really have much stage background. I grew up wanting to do film. And then when I moved to New York, I wanted to be working and I wanted to be directing, and I thought going stage would actually help me learn how to work with actors better, and also blocking and all those good things. So I kind of jumped into theater to just learn those things, and I enjoyed theater. Don't get me wrong. It's just I don't do. I would like to write a play. I've just not sat down and done. I've always just been in film, so I always feel like the outsider in the theater world. Like they're looking at me like, you don't know what you're doing. You're just a film person. So yes, it's actually quite limited in stage. But I like language, so I'm very picky often about dialogue, and my actors will tell you, as they have to always say on book. I think most of my tweaks are always just dialogue. I'll tweak to death. I just like finding interesting ways to say things, and being able to pack all this meaning into like one sentence, and all that good stuff. So I love language. So it's in Producing Juliet, I really kind of set out to write it, and I set it more in the theater world so it wouldn't feel so foreign. When you had that language, it would help to flow naturally and feel more natural. So I really enjoyed writing Producing Juliet, because I could go crazy on the language. So there you go.
I'm kind of shocked. I mean, because maybe that's rubbed off you a little bit. Maybe, I don't know what. Like, good plays, when you watch them, you just sit back and go, wow, it's fascinating dialogue, because it has to be fascinating dialogue, because they're not able to do effects or anything. It can distract you from anything else. And that's what I feel every time I watch your stuff, because of the dialogue. So.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I've fooled you in some way.
You can definitely try writing a play, though, too. So.
What's that?
Definitely try writing a play. I think it would be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of the thought with Producing Juliet that the play that they're trying to produce, that I would actually go write that play, and then we would actually put it up either in New York or in LA or something, and then that would be in between the seasons. Because I did have to start writing that play a little bit. There's a little bit of it in season 1 where you'll get a touch of it. There's like enough of it where I'm like, all right, I'll just write this, and if I change it, then nobody will really know. So I was just trying to give the idea of what it was maybe about. So I will sometime after I'm done writing all these other things I'm writing, but sometime.
So, if anybody has film education, for example, or just reads film books, most of it's all traditional mediums, either traditional television, or feature film writing. So, what was some unique challenges that you faced when you first started writing web series, trying to convert from that kind of mindset to writing for web series?
I'll let you start, Dan.
Oh, for me, it was sort of the extracurriculars of it all. That's sort of what's fun, is the extra content or the things that are parallel to the narrative or outside the actual episodes and stuff that you're able to do online. That maybe used to, early on might have been like DVD extras or something like that. Now they're usually a part of the series, and you want that kind of stuff. Sort of video blogs from characters that you'll see sometimes, or short just bits in between episodes, or like Tina was saying, like maybe putting a play in between seasons. Things like that you could really only do on the web to sort of build out the world. You never think about that when you're thinking about a TV show or a film or anything. You're only thinking about the thing itself, the hour TV that you're going to make or the 2-hour film that you're going to make. You don't think about these extra little bits. So really kind of getting your head in that space, thinking about transmedia opportunities, this sort of idea that people have of where your content is going to be on multiple platforms and tracing the narrative that way. You really have to kind of train yourself to think in a different way as a storyteller and be aware of the different platforms. Like Tina was saying, you want to go out and see what other people are doing. How do you find other web series? Where are they living besides YouTube? So it's really just for me, it was really kind of getting familiar with that vocabulary of like, what is YouTube? What is YouTube? How do you, where would you put bonus videos? What is like a Twitter account for one of the characters look like? So kind of familiarizing yourself with all that kind of stuff.
I think you should have had a companion web series with cats in an insane asylum. We're great on it.
I mean, that would have done gangbusters. I mean, we'd had you in development, millions of hits.
You could have been ahead of the curve. They could have been all orange cats, and that could have been Orange is the New Black right there.
Oh, man. It's done. Mic drop.
So, here's an age-old debate in writing, character versus plot. So, for you guys in your own writing, what comes first, character or plot?
Well,
Great question. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it is often character. I mean, I most of my stories come from a thought that I have about something, like something like looking at something a different way, or having a feeling about something, or it all kind of comes from an idea of a feeling or an emotion that I'm feeling, or something you have to get through. And then I kind of build around that. So it's always character for me. I think that certainly not for everybody. Certainly people that are much better at plot than I am, and then something I think a lot of us character writers kind of have to figure out too. Is sometimes where people are like, well, what's the plot? What's the plot? And I'm just like, but it's about these people, and for me too, I just always kind of think of television as more character-driven than that. Although it has become really plot-driven, but that's kind of just how I think of it. And even though film was for me often character-driven too, but there was certainly much more of a plot on the film side. To me, I feel like you can't really survive too long unless you have really strong characters, unless people connect to those characters and want to see those characters. I mean, there's, for me, like even Battlestar Galactica, which is like, feels like it's so plot driven, is to me still a character drama. And it's like in this fantastic world, and they get to explore all these amazing, and I just think it was one of the best character dramas written. And it's and as Dan was talking about world building, I think it's definitely a big part of that as well. So my answer is always characters. Not that
no, I'd agree. no, I mean, Battlestar is a great example because you're right. It's sort of like this big idea kind of blockbuster concept that you could probably pitch in a log line, but if it doesn't have the characters, you're not there.
Right.
You know, and you're not going to come back week to week or online, you know, episode to episode if not for the characters. That's who you're coming back to see.
Right.
I mean, to me, I like a good mystery, you know. So if there's anything that I'm leaning to plot-wise, it's the mystery element. But I think that can also serve character as well, because you know, obviously people have a lot of different layers to them, and so it's figuring out who is this person really, who are they at work versus at home with their spouse versus their sister or whomever. You know, I think solving the mysteries about people is big a thing of solving the case of the week or whatever other mystery you have layered in.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of mysteries, because Asylum does have some mysteries to it, right? So,
amen.
So when it came to that, so mystery like authors, for example, one thing many of them suggest is to figure out the answer, the who did it or whatever, and then work backwards. For example, is that a sort of approach that you take with that type of mystery writing, or are you doing more of a lost thing? You're just kind of taking it as you go, or something?
To a certain extent, I think you have to answer some questions along the way. You know, I think Lost kind of ran into that. But I don't think you can possibly go into it knowing all of the answers. And I think if you do, I think the audience will beat you to it. To be honest, you know, if you go in trying to pepper in clues to what the final reveal is going to be, I think people are going to get ahead of you and lose interest. So I think you want to keep some of the mystery alive for yourself as well. And yeah, so like for Asylum, we answered some of the big questions at the end of the 6 episodes, but there were some bigger ones at the end that I don't necessarily have the answers to. You know, I think if I sat down to write them, hopefully I would figure them out along the way. But when I wrote those cliffhangers, I didn't necessarily have anything in mind. I think that's okay. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's not the way to go, but I think it's great to not know as a writer. I think to me that's really inspiring to go down and be like, okay, how do I solve this mystery that I've created for myself? How do I get myself out of this corner?
Yeah, I think sometimes you do have to write that way. You're just like you almost, you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to go quite there yet. And you're like, no, that's it. You know, instead of playing it safe, you take that risk, and they're just like, I'm going to make that strong choice, and then I'll figure it out, and how it's going to unfold later on. But, you know, it's never a bad thing to make that, you know, risky, strong choice instead of like, well, like, this will put me in a corner here, so maybe I shouldn't go here. I think it's always good to go on the risky side. So, yeah.
And I think a lot of traditional TV writers sort of do that too. I mean, I know in Lost they always were trying to tell you they knew the answer, but now that it's over,
yeah, right.
Like, no, we didn't.
Good job, guys.
And I think they handled it better than like X-Files, where I really don't think Chris Carter. I think he wrote himself in some corners, not realizing it, and made it really, really hard for him. So, I guess when looking at web series, because both of you have taught, and you do give examples of other web series and what they do, what are some things that you've seen out of web series that are some of the bigger mistakes you've seen, like newer web series creators sometimes make?
Well, I guess I will go with, again, the idea is like always knowing your audience, and you know, there's certainly a lot of series I see that come out that have kind of just a very broad audience, which, yeah, could, you know, broadcast lives on broad audiences, but I think for the web you really have to know what niche audience you're going after. And I've often seen many shows where I'm like, oh, this is, you know, there's nothing about this that I'm like, oh, this makes sense to go, you know, grab this audience and be on this website. I think you know, and I guess also too is just the, you know, really care and attention to how important that script is. I think the great thing about the web is that we get to go put up work whenever we want to do it, and that's a fantastic thing. I think, and sometimes can work against people because they're just like, I just want to do something, and they'll just, take a weekend and write something, and then they'll go and film it. And I know, and I'm sure Dan and every other writer knows, that sometimes it's just, you write something, but if you let it sit, there's like something better that's going to pop up where you're like, oh, that's actually a better choice, and that will be so much better for the story and character. Just that kind of gestation period that you need to make your story better. So I feel like sometimes people just rush to do stuff instead of really thinking about, like, where can I take this? What is the good story? Can this be better? All those things that you have to run through when you're actually, if you work for someone, a studio or somebody that's paying for the whole show, you kind of skip all that and you're just like, I'm just going to go and do it, when you probably shouldn't. You should really still think about it and make sure you're putting up the best thing that you think you can. So that's my thought.
No, I'm gonna agree. I'm gonna piggyback on one of your points, Tina. It's like there's really power in specificity. Like knowing your audience, having a clear point of view, and just going after it. I think works so well online. Like that's the one of the biggest advantages of doing a web series as being on TV or making a film, is that you don't have to have the broad appeal. You can have a really niche appeal, and you can find all those people all over the world, and if you can get them to really connect with your content, they'll share it with their friends, and that's beyond just like having a lot of views and stuff, which is cool. It's great to just have that community. I think that's the whole point. That's why we do this, is because we want to tell a story to people that they connect with and enjoy. And if you have a sharp audience that you can get in touch with, I mean, there's nothing better than that.
Yeah.
And then another tip that I would say is just realize how valuable the on-screen time is. Like, there's so many distractions that people have, obviously, when they're watching stuff. They're not going to give you a lot of time if it's a new thing, or even if it's something that they're coming back to. They might click away. So just realize that every second that you're putting on screen, make it count. Not to say that everything has to be super quick cuts or short episodes, but just be aware that like everything you're putting on screen should serve a purpose. Should be furthering character or story or engaging the audience somehow. Don't put no dead air. Cut through that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I think just to continue with your one point about knowing your audience, I kind of look at it like this ladder of who your potential numbers could be, right? And like network television is where you could potentially get the most people in theory, although it's changing. And because of that, you want to be very broad. And then cable TV were the first to really kind of do the niche-oriented stuff, like the Sci-Fi Channel, for example. And then I feel like we're the next, tier of that, of getting even nichier with the internet. So I think you're right. People really should make sure they know who their audience is, because even if your audience is only a few thousand people, really, I mean, that's still, if they're really diehard fans, that's a powerful fan base for crowdfunding or whatever to keep your show going.
Yeah, and if you are interested in getting a sponsor or branded content or something like that, that's important to brands. If there's a specific demographic that they're targeting and they can get in front of those eyeballs, that means something, even if it's not a big number.
All right, so we've covered a bunch of stuff, writing and beyond. So for writing tips, what's a big tip you'd like to share that you already haven't covered that you like to really share with people?
Oh, boy.
We've kind of touched on it before, but I would definitely say take a risk, do something new. I think if you're going to go through all of the work of writing and going into production and all the work that it takes to put together a web series, be bold, do something new, be something that people haven't seen before. Otherwise I'm not sure why you're doing it, like get out there and get your point of view across, but do it in a way that hasn't been done before. I think that's what's great about the web, is people are expecting that too. People are expecting something new and ambitious, and so, I don't know, I would just say go for it.
Yeah, and I think too. I guess the big tip, which I always try to keep in mind, is just to stay disciplined and write. It's so easy for us to just go on Facebook and say, "Oh, I'm writing today." It's like you're not if you're on Facebook. So it's
Well, technically, there's words going on Facebook.
yes, right. It's so I think it gets really easy for us to get distracted by having to post something on social media, and writing is so much about discipline, and actually just every day going and doing it, and so I guess my tip is to kind of understand that discipline and know that. And that we all struggle with it. There's probably not any writer, from Julian Fellows down, maybe not Julian Fellows, but, well, I would say a little bit probably, but he's probably not on social media as much. But everybody kind of, I think all writers are, I think, obviously the best part of creating stories is when you're just running it in your head and you get really excited about it. It's that early part of like you found the story in your journal, jotting down notes, and you're like building it, and you love that part of it. It's like the best part of writing. And then the worst part is when you actually have to sit down and actually type up scenes and then all the rest of it, that's where the kind of the discipline comes in, so but after you get past that, that's, past the hard part. Rewriting for me has always been easy, maybe not for others, but I always just think the hardest thing is just getting everything down and then kind of going from there. And it's a big discipline for all of us to have to do it, especially with all these distractions. So.
Oh, for sure. There's an app or software you can download. I can't remember the name of it right now.
Oh, that's right, that you can block all of your social media out. Yes, I should do that.
Wow.
I'd have to throw my phone somewhere else, though, too. So it's like we have like all these options to keep distracted.
Well, along with that, because that's a really important point. I think a lot of writers, or all writers, at some point, I'm sure, face is just not procrastinating, actually getting it done, because like you said, the idea is always really exciting, but then when you try to actually communicate the idea in every little detail, it's very easy to get distracted. It's very easy to start cleaning their house.
Yes. There's a lot of cleaning that goes on, yes.
Besides that app we mentioned, for you two, is there anything you do whenever you write, a ritual or just a trick you do sometimes to help you out with getting your project done on time?
Well, I'm big on deadlines. I give myself deadlines for, if I'm writing a pilot, I'll give myself deadlines for acts or just pages. Even if they shift, even if I have to, update them, just to have that in front of me every day. I have a little sticky note on my computer where I just have all those deadlines, and it just motivates me and says, okay, you got to get this done because it's due in 2 days or whatever,
Yeah.
So that helps me a lot, for sure.
Yeah, and sometimes I'll do like, this is how many pages I have to do today, and I usually do on the lower side because then when I go past it, I feel even better. So I'm like, even if I want to do like 5 pages a day, I'll say every day you just have to do 3 pages. So when it's, I do 5 pages, I'm like, yes. It's like I did even more than I thought I was going to have. So I always aim low, and then when I hit more, then it feels even better, and that keeps you kind of just moving along.
Right, momentum is key, exactly.
Yes, yeah.
All right, so I think both of you said that you sometimes suggest web series. What are 3 web series that you would suggest for everyone to go check out because of some strength that they have that people can learn from? Besides your own, of course, because they're all great, of course.
I'd have to say High Maintenance for sure.
Yeah.
I love that show. I think it just does it's so smart, and it's a great way of showing, just a different way to structure a narrative. I mean, they're all character studies that are very barely linked together, by this one character that kind of shows up in each one. So I think it's a sort of out-of-the-box way to tell a story, and also they're just great, great character studies. And they're doing a fun new business model, done the pay through Vimeo thing, which is anytime someone can figure out a new way to make money on the web, it's exciting for me. So I would definitely check out High Maintenance. And then talking about different ways to tell the story, Lizzie Bennet Diaries is for me, is a great narrative because it's all told from a webcam, all from one location, but it just has great characters again, coming and going, and they're drawing on classic literature for source material, but it's a cool update on it and a way to engage an audience. We talked about niche audiences. They found people that like these books, and they talked right to them. Only if you have read Jane Austen thoroughly do you know what these characters are talking about. But if you do, you love these shows, and they've been a hit for it. So I definitely check that one out too.
I really actually liked The Booth at the End. It was definitely a show where I was like, oh, I'm so curious to see how they can make this to keep me coming back. Like, how can they keep my attention? I just think it was written so well that every time I was still very interested to come back. And the fact that throughout that series you never saw any of those things that were going on. You just heard that story of what happened. I just thought it was such a well-written show, and it just so fits like what the web is. We don't have the resources or the money to do these big things, and it's like, what can I do to tell a really great, compelling story if I only have this one location? And that show is like the greatest example of like how the writing had to be so good in that show in order for it to be as good as it was. And I just think it was so well written, and to be able to do that and keep my interest all the time. So I think as a writer, it's definitely worth checking out, just to understand the strength of writing and how important it is. And the definitely ones Dan mentioned, I think, are good to look at for the form, for sure. And I also just still think I still tell my students to watch The Guild, because I still think The Guild is still the best example of a show that was so smart, and knowing who that audience was and just tapping into that audience that ended up being like huge, and so I just think it's really one of the smartest shows that knew instinctively who their market was and went after them, and just became like this huge success because they were so smart in that. So I always do still recommend The Guild to check out, to really understand how important it is to know your audience.
Great. All right. And everybody should check out, of course, Producing Juliet and Anyone But Me. Excellent. Everything. Excellent dialogue, excellent, relationship dramas. And then Asylum's great, suspense, mystery. So I still picture the opening scene of the man walking, stumbling with the blood dripping down. So that's great input. So we're wrapping up now, and before we go, though, can each of you tell everyone where they can find you and your work online? And let's start with Tina.
Well, you can always just find out what I'm doing at just my name, tinasaward.com, and then follow me on Twitter. It should be on the screen, TCWNYC. Just the easiest way to see what I'm doing.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I'm on Twitter very rarely, but at by Dan Williams, and then I have a website, bydanwilliams.com as well, if you want to check out my latest projects, and my Creator Up series is there as well.
Awesome. And for me, I'm on Twitter at Mr. Marx, and I do have a website, marxpyle.com, which needs quite a bit of updating, but it is. And I guess I forgot to mention in the beginning, I do a podcast called Genretainment that's part of sci-fi-pulse-radio.com. We interview all sorts of people, but including web series creators. So, and you guys have just finished watching Content Creators Corner from the IAWTV. IAWTV can be found, of course, at IAWTV.org. And you guys can check out this and the past episode and future episodes over at IAWTV.org/CCC, triple C. If you just picture pro wrestler. And that'll help you remember. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. It's been great.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.